Everybody thinks that accounting is like math. Accounting is not like math. It's more like art. It is pretty creative, but it allows you to see the health of your company, the direction that you're going, potential trends that are happening within your business. And if you disconnect from that completely, then you lose touch with what's really happening. You may be working very hard. You may be creating a great blog with fantastic food and pictures and all of that other stuff. But if it's not getting the results you need and you're not aware that that's happening, you'll find yourself a year and a half down the road and not realize that you're not heading where you thought you would be.
That was Darren Judd, and this is episode number 135 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. I am your host, and this is the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. My goal is to share with you thoughts, stories, interviews, everything related to food blogging so we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Before we get into today's show, just a quick word about the webinar we had earlier this month, the one with Casey Marquis about search engine optimization. The webinar was great. It went without a hitch. I was very pleased with it, and we received lots of great positive feedback. As a result, we are now working on more webinars and courses to come your way soon. Here's the way I look at it. We're all out here doing this work kind of like all independently, and we're all trying to figure out the best ways of doing it. And if we can bring some experts your way that can help you shed light on the way that you're doing things, maybe the way that other people are doing things so that you can kind of get a good idea of how best that you want to do it for yourself. Well, I just think that's brilliant. And that's my goal with whatever we're doing here with the podcast, with the blog, with webinars or courses, whatever we're doing my goal is to really help you, know your business and be your best at it. So we are excited to be working behind the scenes right now here at Chopped, and I'll have more information to share with you about all that soon. But in the meantime, make sure you've signed up for the Chopped Academy newsletter so you'll be the first to find out about it when everything comes available. Just go to chopped.academy and then scroll down to the bottom of the page, and then that's where you'll find the sign up form. Okay, let's move on to today's episode. Today I'm talking to Darren Judd. He's a CPA at his own firm, and it's called 4-7 Accounting. I learned about Darren from Carrie-Ann Cheney. She's with the site Oh Sweet Basil. Carrie-Ann was on the show back in episode number 75. I think you should really go back and listen to that one again. She's talking about the secrets of working with brands. And that's something that's of importance to so many food bloggers. It's a great episode. I really think you'll love listening to it. If you haven't listened to it yet, I think you should go take a look at it. You're going to love it. You'll hear a lot of the great things that Carrie-Ann is doing. So I have really been wanting to have an accountant on the show for a long time, and I was so happy when Carrie-Ann mentioned Darren. So I reached out to him. The reason I've been wanting to have an accountant on the show is because so as I talk with, I've been at this podcast now for 2 years, and I've talked to a lot of really good food bloggers. And I did the conference too. I've just been at this for a while, and I've had lots of conversations with people. And when I ask them a question about things like they don't like the most about food blogging, what I typically hear is that they really don't like the business side. We love the artistic side. We love the photography, even though sometimes that's kind of love-hate too, right? I know that, but we'll go take the courses and get better at photography. We'll practice and the same thing with writing, the same thing with creating recipes. It's like more artistic, and it feels like I got to get better at this, and you feel inspired about it. Whereas the business side feels like, I'll put that off till next month. I'll put that off, and next thing you know, it's like March, right? And then you're sitting there knowing that your accountant or your bookkeeper or somebody, your spouse, somebody is like looking for your taxes to be filled out by April 15th or whatever that date is. And you got to get that information done soon. And so that's why I feel like now is the right time to be having this conversation about your principles of accounting, because, by March, it's really kind of too late. That's a little bit like talking about a diet in November. I don't know about you, but does that drive you crazy? It feels to me like every time our family is around Thanksgiving dinner, people are there talking about diets. I'm like, what are we talking about? This is not a day to be talking about diets. We should just be eating. However, okay, I say that and I realize there's probably no bad day to be, talking about getting healthy. And so the same could be true about, good business practices. So even if it's March and you're just now dealing with your business practices, it's okay. I just think it's better if we could be talking about it like right now in June so that you can set some processes in place and be ready. Can you just imagine yourself, New Year rolls around and it's all of a sudden 2018 and it's March and you're not stressed out at all. You've got all your ducks in a row and it's just a matter of turning over some paperwork to your accountant and they take off with your taxes and everything is good. And who knows, maybe even before March, maybe it's January and you're turning all your paperwork over to your accountant and you, wow, can you just imagine how great that would feel not to feel so stressed out about that? So that's one of the reasons I'm really excited to be sharing this conversation with Darren. And interestingly enough, Darren has an interesting perspective on the field of accounting as well. He considers it more art. And, we have a tendency to kind of look at accounting as math, right? And so he has this perspective that it can be art as well. In fact, that kind of reminds me of a story I heard once where they took the same set of papers and delivered them to a bunch of different accountants and they got all kinds of different returns. So they were tasked with filling out the tax papers for this one set of information that they received, this couple. And so one accountant returned that the couple needed to pay all this money in taxes, and another one returned that they didn't have to pay anything, it was just breaking even. And then another one returned that they were owed thousands of dollars. That's just from looking at the very same paperwork. And you want to know what my question is after that story is, what's the name of that last accountant? I want the one that's going to get me some money back. But Darren and I talk about that too. We talk about, what should be your philosophy on your accountant principles. What, we want to be aggressive, right? But we don't want to be stupid about it. So you want to be, I think he said aggressive, but not abusive. That's what it was. Aggressive, but not abusive. And so we want to have this kind of mindset with your account, with what things are you taking as deductions. We talk about all of that, what kind of entity you should be set up as, if anything, if you choose to do anything, what kind of entities should you be set up like? And, the options there are obviously sole proprietorship. You could be an LLC. You could also be an S Corp. And we also point out that Darren is an accountant and you may get a different reaction if you're talking to an attorney. They have different perspectives at times. So it's important to think about that and get the information probably from both sides of the story before you make the decision for your blog, your company. So we talk about, I think, several great tips about how you can set up your business, your food blog to be your business, and some good, basic accounting principles that you can follow to, just make things run more smoothly throughout the year. Anyway, I think you're going to love today's episode. I know that I did. So let's get straight to it. Here's today's feature interview with Darren Judd. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Darren Judd of 4-7 Accounting. He's on the show today. Hey Darren, welcome to the Chop Podcast.
Thank you, Marley. It's good to be with you.
Well, I'm really happy to have you here. And I know that this is a topic that maybe doesn't, create lots of excitement in people, but I think it should. And I think you probably agree, Darren, that it should, because we're talking about money and how you can track your accounting and all these things that will really help you get the business side of things really humming along. But before we get into all of that, I would really love for you to give a little bit of background about yourself, Darren. How is it that you decided to start your own accounting firm?
Well, I'll jump into that in 1 second. I want to talk about the excitement you mentioned.
Okay.
It's similar to going to the dentist, I guess. It's not something to look forward to, but it's essential for maintaining the health of a business like your teeth. So as not fun as it can be at times, it is a good thing to know and understand and have somebody to work with. So, and I love it. I don't know what else I'd do if I wasn't doing accounting. When I started my education, I got into some accounting courses and just really was engaged by those. So continued on with that. I got a master's degree in accounting. I live in Utah and went to Southern Utah University, where I got my master's degree, and then worked as a CFO for a small software company for a few years. and then decided to go into public accounting, where I worked at a local CPA firm for another 5 years, and kind of was a continuation of my education. So that was a really good experience. And after that, I decided to venture out on my own. The large firm environment's a little tough because you have 10 different bosses and they all want stuff done now. So I decided to go out on my own, where I figured I could save my clients some money and also create a flexible schedule for myself that I've found very, very enjoyable.
Yeah, that's really important, especially I think you mentioned on your bio that you have 4 kids.
4 kids, yeah. And I'm a pretty young dude. I'm not very old, and my oldest daughter just turned 19, so that's kind of weird.
That is weird, but in a good way, right?
Yeah, it's just I still feel like I'm 18 inside my head, and to have a 19-year-old is just a little surreal.
My husband's parents are young, and I mean, they had him, I think, when they were 19 or 20. And I did think it's really cool because I have the opposite experience where my parents were older when they had me. And I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm an accident because I'm the youngest. My siblings are quite a bit older than me. So I have the opposite experience, but it's really cool to experience him. Like, they went to concerts together. They do, they listen to some music that he also loves. So there's kind of fun things about having young parents.
Yeah, they're cool.
Yes, they're cool. Way cool. Yeah. So I have to ask you one thing really quickly. What does 4-7 accounting mean? That's an interesting name.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like I said, when I was at the firm, they had me going in 20 different directions, and I was, just super busy. It was very normal to be working 60, 70-hour weeks, and I just got tired and burnt out. And so when I created my company, I thought, well, I want to work 4 days a week for 7 hours a day. And that was kind of where the concept or idea came from. And that hasn't worked out really. I still work quite a bit more than that. But there's balance to be had in life, and there's so much other enjoyable things to be doing besides working. And so I wanted to have a little bit more of that and eliminate the 70-hour work weeks.
I love that. And so, it's almost like putting your mission statement right in the name of the company.
Yeah, that's right. Although I don't follow it, so that's probably pretty shameful, but you do what you have to do.
Yes. Okay. So then I have to ask you this question too, because, we're talking, the primary audience here is food bloggers. And I'm just curious, are you a foodie at all? Do you like food?
Well, out of all of the things that we can indulge in life, food is probably the least risky. And it just, yeah, absolutely. Who doesn't like food?
That's right. Okay, good. I'm glad to get that clarified. Now, I got your name from Carrie Ann Cheney. She's a friend of the show. She's been on the podcast. She's with the site Oh Sweet Basil. And I feel like this should be good news to people who are listening to this podcast episode, because they're just going to know right offhand that we're talking to an accountant that actually has experience working with food bloggers.
Yeah, that's right. And Carrie Ann's a great client. She's referred several food bloggers over to me that I've worked with, and I don't know what it is about the food blogger or the blogger industry, but the people are fantastic.
Yeah.
They're super responsive and just enjoyable to work with. They're just a good bunch, and I don't know what the commonality is there, but I enjoy the heck out of working with them.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that. And I'm also glad, for people listening to today's show to know that, we're talking about accounting for food bloggers, and you're going to have some real good, relevant advice for everybody. Well,
I hope so. There's some principles that apply to all businesses, but certainly some things that are unique to food bloggers. So we'll talk a bit about those special situations and things to watch out for.
Cool. And I think another thing I want to clarify before we get too far into the weeds is that I just feel like there's so many different ways people can set up their books. And so we're going to try to hit on some of the things that we think will be relevant for, probably most online businesses or most businesses in general. But there's always some nuances that people might have out there. There's some specific questions that address just them, but we're going to try to stick with the things that really impact most everybody.
Right. Yeah. We'll do mostly general that applies to most people. I think that's wise.
Okay, cool. So the first question I wanted to ask you is really about how to pick a good accountant. Do you have like if somebody's out there looking for an accountant that could help them with their food blog, do you have a couple of things that you would suggest people, would look for, or maybe questions they would ask them?
Probably the best place to go to start off with is people that you know, people that you trust, and that work with somebody that they're already familiar with, that they can rely on, and have done a good job for them. So it's not really going to the yellow pages or doing a Google search trying to find an accountant. It's really the relationships that you have, and those people have relationships with other professionals and things that they've used and have been happy with. And so I think that's the best place to start is with your network and finding people that have good experiences that you can just adopt or piggyback on.
Do you think it's important to have an accountant that's nearby, or in today's world, they could have an accountant that's in another state even, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My business is kind of specifically one of my goals is to go that direction where I have clients all over the place with email and video conferencing and cell phone technology and all the other amazing things we have. You do not have to have your accountant up the street from you anymore. I've got clients in California and Idaho and Colorado. My furthest client from me is in Russia. So
wow.
Yeah, and it works great. We just don't have to sit face to face anymore like it used to need to be done with the technology we have. So absolutely, you can look for accountants that are in different locations and have a successful experience, especially with people that are comfortable with that technology.
Yes, that's really great to know. Are there some things when you have a client that you find really helpful? Like I think we talked about the idea of accounting software. If you've got a client that's using accounting software, does that make things easier for you?
Yeah, absolutely. With accounting software, it used to be that those things were stored on the desktop and there wasn't really a way to get to it. We were backing up files and emailing files and trying to connect that way. But with the online accounting systems now, there's QuickBooks Online and Zero Accounting and Wave Accounting. There's several different programs where we can both access the same file from a web browser and be able to work on that file and run reports. So absolutely the accounting software has changed to adapt to that kind of remote accountant idea.
Is there any one in particular, or you think there a lot of them have good things to offer?
Well, yeah, and that's a hard question to ask because they all have something different. But 90% of the accounting software that I use is tied to QuickBooks Online.
Okay.
Which is fantastic. For most businesses, that works. For food bloggers, it definitely works. Some of the limitations are in tracking inventory and retail sales. So with food blogging, that's not really an issue.
I see, because we're not really keeping track of too much inventory.
Right. Yeah. It'd be maybe some food inventory, but I don't think we're trying to keep track of how much we have and how much we have available to sell. So it's just not an issue.
Awesome. And it obviously has invoicing. That's really, a primary thing is being able to track invoicing, and that's all included.
Yeah, exactly. If we're doing work for people and sending out invoices to them and we don't follow up on that, sometimes those things can get lost. And some of the accounting software packages allow for us to keep track of those so they don't get lost and we get the invoices paid that, we're not doing this work for free. It's something that our goal is to collect that at some point. So
yeah, exactly.
Having the accounting software helps keep track of those things that you may forget about otherwise.
Right. I think that's great. And, I think this is a topic that a lot of food bloggers ask, and this is maximizing deductions. And, how do you recommend to the food bloggers that you work with, how do you recommend that they go about keeping track of their deductions?
One of the biggest things that I see that is helpful is having a dedicated bank account or /credit card for the business. if you get into running things through a personal account with all of your groceries and mortgage payment, utilities, and all of that stuff, it's hard to go back later and weed those things out and capture the appropriate deductions. So if they'll first start out by setting up dedicated accounts for that business activity, and then everything that's business related, they pay for with the business account. And that helps capture all the appropriate stuff. And they're going to say, well, what's the appropriate expenses that we run through the business? That's always the big question. And the broad answer, or the IRS code, would say anything that is ordinary and necessary. So if you're running a food blog, it may not be ordinary and necessary to have a water ski boat. And you laugh, but people actually ask me that. Hey, can I buy a ski boat and put my company logo on it and deduct that through the business? And, well, yeah, you can do it, but you and I will end up in jail, and we're not going to enjoy that too much. So
No.
You got to be careful with that. But anything else that's ordinary and necessary for the business is appropriate to pay for with business funds. Certainly the food, appliances, cell phones and internet and computers and cameras and all the other things that the business needs to produce the income that it's earning. So that's the general answer. Some of the deductions that people forget about is like a home office deduction. I mentioned internet and cell phones. They think, well, the internet is in my house and my family uses it. And I'm like, well, yeah, but it's essential to the business. You can't do the business that you're doing without it. So have the business pay for the internet, have the business pay for your cell phone. Right. And another thing that they'll forget, because there's not a transaction that goes with it, is miles on your personal vehicle. So if you're driving to the grocery store or driving to a conference or driving to a client's office, yeah, you need to keep track of the business miles with a log, so that you can take advantage of that deduction, because you're using a personal resource for the benefit of the business. So there is a business deduction to be had there.
What about, you're meeting up with another food blogger in the area to have coffee to talk about food blogging? Exactly.
Completely appropriate.
Yeah.
That is akin to marketing, if you will. You've got to create those relationships and conversations about, well, what are you doing in your company and how are you effective, and kind of work together to make the best of what you're doing. And honestly, when I said ordinary and necessary, one way to determine if that's appropriate is look at what other businesses are doing. Certainly it is a normal business practice to go out with clients and other business partners and things like that to discuss business. So certainly that is appropriate.
Well, if that's your line of thinking, like I have seen other businesses where they might get something like season tickets to the Royals, because they're, I'm in Kansas City, so I can say that, because they want to take clients out on a regular basis. So that kind of brings that ski boat back into, if you could justify that you're taking clients out on the ski boat to wine and dine them, I guess you could then do that, right?
Yeah, you can, if that's the thing. I've got some financial managers that golf, and that is really the way that they generate business and contacts, is through golf. So they do a lot of golfing, and that's the way they entertain, and that's the way that they create these relationships. So yeah, there's some things that can be done there, but again, the ski boat, you've got to measure it in terms of, are we being abusive to the tax code? Are we going to be able to stand in front of an IRS examiner or in front of a judge and feel comfortable with saying, yeah, I bought that ski boat and I'm okay with it? So there's a little bit of a gut check to some of those expenses. If it makes you feel uncomfortable or worried about the consequences, then maybe it's not appropriate.
I get that. In fact, I had an accountant that used to say, I like to be aggressive, but not stupid.
Yeah, that's good. And I say aggressive versus abusive.
Oh, that's good too. Yes. Right. You got to find that, like you were saying earlier, finding balance in your work. I think it seems like there's got to be a balance in accounting as well. The kinds of things that you deduct need to make sense.
That's right. And you have to remember that the tax code is pretty abusive on its own. So we do want to be aggressive and take advantage of everything that is appropriate and that won't get us into trouble. because we don't need to be paying more taxes than we have to.
Right. Got you. And why leave money on the table if you can, if there's some things that you, like you say, you forgetting about your cell phone that you use a lot for business or, internet. Those are really good examples of things that you may be leaving on the table and not realizing that you can deduct that.
Yeah, that's right. And it's usually the things that you don't have a transaction for, that you don't pay money for, that you forget about, like the auto miles or the home office, because there's no exchange of money there, because it's just, you're kind of paying for it personally, so it gets forgotten about for business use. But food bloggers especially, they definitely have home office deductions because they're cooking there, they're running all of their blogging posts sitting at a home office desk. So the mortgage or rent is being paid personally, but there's some tax deductions to be taken with the business expenses.
Can we talk about that home office deduction? Is that, you need a space that is just for the work that you're doing, or can it be, a desk that's in your living room, things like that?
Yeah, so the desk in the living room is tough. The IRS code says that the space has to be dedicated space, meaning it can't be used for anything else. So having the nursery and the home office together is a challenge because that's where your child is sleeping. So it has to be dedicated space, and once you've decided that, the maximum deduction is up to 300 square feet. So you can't take like half of your home and call that a home office. There's two ways to take that deduction. The new version that I really enjoy that they put into place, 3-4 years ago, is the simplified method, where you just take $5 per square foot of dedicated office space for your home office deduction. So it's not a major thing. It gets up to a maximum of $1,500, but it's better than nothing.
Exactly. And that adds up over time. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
I think we're kind of leading into this question, which is, is it better to be an S Corp or an LLC? And I've been both. So I definitely see the pros and cons, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, there's no easy answer. They're both very good business entity setups. The S corporation, the rules and court law and things that are out there to support how that operates and functions are a lot more solid than the LLC. The LLC is a little ambiguous. They're still trying to figure out how things are supposed to work. The IRS has proposed regulations out there of how they want to treat things, but that has not been turned into law. So there's some gray area with the LLCs. And so I've been more and more pushing people towards S corporations. There are some limitations both ways. This is a fairly in-depth conversation, but I'll just hit some of the highlights.
Okay.
The S corporation is good, again, because of the rules are pretty buttoned up, and how we can do some of the tax planning with that I really, really like. But the drawback is you have to run payroll on yourself. So once you're an S corporation, you have to pay yourself as an employee of that corporation. So you're processing payroll, you're issuing W-2s. So there's a bit more administration to that. Now, payroll is a bit of a commodity out there, and it's pretty easy and pretty cost effective to just have somebody do that for you. So that really shouldn't deter people from using the S corporation. Probably the main drawback with the S corporation is, and this may not affect food bloggers, but other entities cannot own the S corporation. It has to be people owners. It has to be individuals that own it. So if an LLC wanted to own the S corporation, it cannot. It would have to be Marley owns the S corporation, not Marley's LLC.
Right.
Okay, so that's one thing to consider. But with your mom and pop shops, that's really not an issue. You've got a husband and wife business or a food blogger business. They're okay to hold that as an individual. So I really, really like the S corp.
Well, and one thing I liked about being an S corp is that I could choose to pay myself a limited salary, which
That's right.
That may sound unattractive to some people, but you pay less taxes because of that.
Right. And so I'll talk about that real quick, but
okay.
let me jump into the LLC and kind of talk about why that salary is important. So in the LLC, it's flexible because you don't have to run payroll. Okay, so you don't have to have that extra administrative expense to process payroll, issue the W-2s. But what the IRS wants to do with the LLC is every bit of net income that comes out of the LLC is taxed at self-employment tax. Okay, and that's what the payroll is. It taxes you for Social Security and Medicare, and that tax rate's about 15%. And that's on top of your federal and your state taxes. So with the LLC, the IRS wants to, and this is the proposed regulation I talked about, they want to say everything that comes out of an LLC is subject to self-employment tax for the owners. And so that gets expensive. 15% tax. If you earned $100,000, you've got an extra $15,000 in tax on those earnings. With your S corporation, like you said, if you pay yourself a reasonable wage, and that's what the IRS wants, a reasonable wage, well, there's some gray area there, right? We can say, well, I only work 4 hours a day, and I have other people doing my food blog posts, and so I'm just not really involved. So you can really minimize that reasonable wage. So on that LLC scenario where you earned $100,000 with an S corporation, what I would like to do is pay you a salary of $50,000 to run the business, and then you take the other $50,000 home as a dividend. The dividend is not subject to the 15% self-employment tax, but the wage is. So on the LLC, you paid $15,000 self-employment tax. On the S corporation, we just paid $7,500 self-employment tax. So we saved $7,500 by being an S corporation.
And of course, there, like you mentioned, there are a little bit more expenses with an S corp because you are going to be setting up, payroll, but that does not equal $7,500.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're probably talking, an extra $1,000 per year to save $7,500 in taxes.
Yeah.
So certainly worth it.
Pretty good return on investment.
Yeah, absolutely is. But if you're very small, earning $10,000 to $20,000, I don't get too excited about getting into an S corporation because I just don't need all that extra administration and expense. So being an LLC is fine for that situation. So once you get over $20,000 in net income, then I start thinking, okay, let's make another plan for you, something that's a little better for tax planning.
So I think you answered the question, like $20,000, up to $20,000. Is that what you're saying is your kind of cutoff?
Right. Yeah. Then I get a little more interested in moving to the S corporation.
I've heard some people who say that they actually don't have any type of legal entity, either S corp or LLC. Do you feel like that's kind of a risky pattern to follow?
It's probably not too risky, and what we call that is sole proprietorship.
Yeah.
And what the S corp and LLCs offer in addition to tax planning is some liability protection. So depending on what industry you're in, I just don't see that there's a lot of liability with food blogging, that you're causing harm or injury or something like that to other people to where somebody would want to sue the business, and also go after your personal assets. And this gets into more of a legal discussion, and I'm an accountant, so I don't want to get too much into the weeds there. But the liability protection of the S corporation and the LLC are certainly there in both of those type of entity structures. So it's good to have them. I don't know what kind of risks are out there, but again, that's a question for your attorney.
Yeah, exactly. But it is good to know what the options are and kind of weigh them. And I feel like, we just talked about S corp and LLC, and people can kind of figure out where they are in that spectrum of earnings and decide, which one is best for them. Right.
And the other thing I would point out about the sole proprietorship, which is not having any entity at all set up, is it's very, very simple. There's very little administration to it. It doesn't file its own tax return like the S corp and LLC do. It just files on a Schedule C on your personal 1040 tax return. So it's very simple, but you lose the ability to do some of the tax planning. And if there is some risk out there, some personal liability, you lose that shield of the entity structure.
So in other words, you're saying if you are sued for some reason, the LLC and the S corp set up some kind of barrier where you're not getting sued. Your personal assets are not on the line.
Exactly. They can go after the company assets, but they'd be blocked from going after your home and your personal autos and savings accounts and things like that.
Right. So, and like you say, I certainly haven't read of too many cases of food bloggers being sued. So it seems like the chances are pretty minimal, but it is something to like have on your radar and to be aware of.
Exactly. And the other thing to maybe consider along with liability is having some liability policies, some insurance policies in place to kind of augment that
Yes.
risk.
And that's minimal cost.
Yeah, they're fairly cheap. If you're running a road construction crew, it's going to be a lot more expensive, certainly, than a food blogger because they have higher risk, right?
Yes. Yeah. So food blogger, I mean, I don't even know what the ranges are. I know that I did some consulting work before and I had some business liability insurance and it was, I want to say it was somewhere between $50 to $100 a year. It was pretty reasonable.
Right. And I have something similar, and it's like called errors and omission insurance,
Yes.
and it's a couple $100s a year. So it not only do you have that corporate structure to kind of protect you personally from liability, having some insurance in place is also a good idea.
I would think that's probably even more the case as our businesses start to grow and we start to hire people. And if they're doing tasks for us, I think having that liability insurance, does that seem like it would be even more important at that point?
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you're running the business and doing every aspect of how that business operates, you're kind of in control of your risks a little bit. But as soon as you hire others or have agents representing you out there, then the risk goes up a little bit because you're no longer personally in control of everything that happens. So there could be promises made or things said that don't really represent you or your business that could create some liability.
So let's talk about that because I do think I certainly encourage people to hire people to help them. I feel like food blogging is a lot of work to do on your own. And so I encourage people to hire people. I also feel like, for me personally, one of the things that held me back is because I felt like, oh, it's just too much work to think about having an employee. But there's a lot of different ranges. Like, we're talking about accounting. You can hire people to do, basically as a contract person for a long time. And can you talk a little bit about the accounting side of having people work for you?
Yeah, so there's two main things we have to look at, and this is kind of laid out for us by the IRS. They call it employee versus contractor. Okay, we try to determine people that are working for you, do they meet the level of an employee? And once they do, then you have to run them through payroll. You process a wage for them, you withhold taxes, you remit those taxes, you file a W-2 for them. So there becomes some administration to doing that. If they don't meet that level of an employee, then they can be employed as like a subcontractor and just paid like a normal vendor would be, just paid like you pay your cell phone or you pay your internet fees. You just pay your contractor, and there's no W-2 that has to be issued. Now, some of the rules that kind of define whether they're an employee or a contractor are what we look to decide what that is. And I'll just throw some of them out. And I don't have all of that in front of me, but some of those would be who's deciding what, when, where, and how that person does their job. And if the employer has very much control over when they're there, what they're doing, how they're doing it, then they're probably going to be an employee. But if that contractor has a lot of latitude of what, when, where, and how they do their job, then they can be considered a contractor. And again, the whole point is that this just simplifies how you pay them and the reporting requirements of paying them.
So if I hire a virtual assistant and I expect them to be at their desk from 9 to 5 and, I have all these kind of rules about how they do the work, that sounds a little bit more like an employee, even if they're like in Florida and I'm in Kansas City.
Well, potentially, but there's some other rules that we'll look to that kind of help define that, and that is whose office space are they in and who provides their equipment. So if they're in their own home office, they're using their own computer, their own internet connection, they start to look more and more like a contractor because you're not having them in your business using your assets and your equipment to do their jobs. So there's more that weighs into it than just how, what, where, when, and how. It's also who provides the assets, where they're doing the work, and several other factors. But those are the main ones.
And it's so easy, I feel like, for people who are interested in hiring people to help them. Virtual assistant kind of situation is so nice, because, like you say, you do just pay them. Like, for example, I have an assistant that works with me, and we have it set up through PayPal. It's so easy. The invoicing comes in, and make the payment. It's done. But I do know that there is a certain point where like you had mentioned earlier, that I need to keep track of. And the form 1090, I'm going to have to send a 1090, but it's pretty easy to do that. I get their W-9, and I think it's $600. Is that right? Once I get over $600, I pay her. That's when I need to send her a 1090.
That's right. And it's actually called a 1099.
Thank you. 1099. I knew it was
So
that.
yeah, any contractor that you pay for services over $600 in a year time, you need to issue a 1099 MIS, MISC.
Yes.
And that's akin to a W-2. It's just that it's much simpler because you're not withholding the taxes, and the filing of it is very simple. But if anybody you're doing services with, like your VA, just issue that or have them fill out that form W-9, and then you've got all the information collected that you can issue that 1099 MIS at the end of the year.
Yes.
If you're neglecting to do that, there's some pretty hefty penalties that come along with it. If the IRS were to come look and say, hey, you should have been reporting 1099 to these contractors and you didn't, so here's your fine and thank you for your business. So
Yes.
It's pretty important to do. We already pay enough taxes. There's no sense in getting fines and penalties for things that are pretty simple to take care of if you just kind of head it off and know
Yes.
that reporting needs to be done.
Yeah, and you can get those forms even at the library. It's really not complicated to fill it out. So
Yeah, it is. But again, just like with our online software, there is now 1099 reporting software that you can run just through Chrome, your Chrome browser. So you don't even need to do the paperwork anymore. You just go fill it out online, and they e-file it for you.
Well, go to your library for other reasons then, because we want to support the libraries.
Yeah. Go to your libraries to read books to the kids or whatever. But as far as filling out government documents and forms, most things you can find online.
Okay, so along the lines of having employees, what are some safeguards that we could do, especially if those employees have any contact with your books or with money? Are there some safeguards you think that we should have in place for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And accounting lingo, we call that internal controls. We like to protect our assets, and the main concept there is that you divide up responsibility so somebody doesn't have access to the business assets and also be able to record in the accounting software so they could basically steal from you and then cover up their tracks. Also, if you've got like an accounts payable clerk or something, you don't want that person to be able to have signature authority on the checks, because then they could print a check, they could sign it, and pay themselves basically. So you're trying to divide up responsibilities in the company, and that's really hard when you're a small company because you've got one person or two people that do everything.
Yes.
So aside from splitting up responsibilities where that may not be possible, some good oversight and just minding the store, just checking the bank statements, looking at check images that clear the bank, doing the bank reconciliation. Those things kind of help deter fraud from happening and also allow you to identify fraud if it were to happen. And, people think, oh, people are good and honest and they wouldn't do that. But one little thing has to happen in somebody's life to where now they're going to do something different, whether they've come up short and they're not going to be able to pay the mortgage, or they've gotten addicted to drugs, and now they're looking for cash. So situations can come up to where people change.
Right.
And at first they think it's quite innocent. Well, I'll just borrow this money for a short period of time so I can pay the mortgage. I'll pay it right back. And then before you know it, they're 2 years down the road and they've stolen $50,000 from the company. So
Yes.
if you do have others working in the business, definitely good to monitor and review things and make sure you're on top of what's going on, instead of just providing the trust that you think should be there. Because sometimes, it's always the person you thought, well, I thought they were honest and And I just can't believe that happened. And it does. It happens.
Right. And it's always disappointing, but you just have to have those safeguards in place if you're going to have employees that are, have access to accounts and things like that. Yeah.
That's right. And it's usually cash. Probably in the food blog world, it's cash. We're not dealing with inventory. We're
Yeah.
not dealing with a whole bunch of computer equipment or company vehicles and things like that. So it's really cash. Uh, and if there's times when they're collecting cash, if they're doing a conference and they're collecting fees or something like that, that's where things are very susceptible to being stolen because it's cash. There's no receipt possibly, so it's easy to take and nobody knows the difference.
Definitely. Well, thank you. That's good advice. I wanted to ask you a question about what do you think are good business practices to have on a regular basis? So I'm always flummoxed when it comes to like, I get so busy on the creative side of food blogging that I oftentimes don't find myself with it's like 6 months in, what are we in June here? It's 6 months in. And it's like, what have I done to prepare for next April, so that next
Right.
April is easy. I'm just curious if you have some ideas or strategies that like maybe the first business day of the month should be your business day kind of thing.
Right. And so I use Google Calendar to not just put appointments on there, but reminders. So I'll put, well, on the 5th of every month, I go in and reconcile the bank account and import all the transactions from the bank so that I can keep track of what's going on. As far as internal controls go, also, if you're importing all the transactions from your credit card and from your bank account and you're reviewing those and adding those to the accounting system, you can identify fraud. So if somebody gets a hold of your credit card number or debit card number and charges things that are not your
Yes.
expenses, you can identify those quicker. So I would say doing a monthly accounting, just importing everything into your accounting software and then reconciling that, make sure you've captured everything. And once that's done, then you can kind of step back a little bit and look at the financial picture of your business. You can look at, well, have I sent out invoices to customers that haven't paid? Do I need to make phone calls for that? How's my revenue looking? Are my expenses in line? Is there anything that I need to cut back on? One thing I get the question about from people is marketing and advertising. Is that valuable? Is it valuable to, have somebody come in and do some search engine optimization work on my blog? And the answer for that is not straightforward. It depends on who
Right.
you're working with, right? But certainly dollars invested in your business have the potential to create new business for you in the future. So it is something that you need to look at and maybe budget for. Say, well, this year I'm going to spend $5,000 on pay-per-clicks or have somebody refine my website so that it shows up better on a Google search or things like that, so you get more eyeballs on your blog.
Right.
And so those type of things, that's a deduction discussion, but it's also a business growth discussion and planning for the future and growing what you're doing.
It sounds like having a kind of a return on investment type formula where you're deciding, am I going to spend that $1,000 on an SEO review of my site because I feel like that's going to bring a return of additional traffic and therefore greater revenue.
Exactly. And that's kind of like choosing your accountant, right? Because not
Yeah.
everybody's as equally capable of doing those things for you. So you've got to research who you're going to work with and make sure that you are getting a return on your investment. Otherwise, you're just flushing money. Yeah, you get a tax deduction for that, but you got no benefit or growth from that money spent.
Right.
So we kind of got off on the weeds a little bit there from your original question about what do I need to be doing throughout the year. And again, that starts with monitoring the business, what's going on, making sure you're watching the bank accounts, make sure you're watching your income and expenses, and then deciding, are there things that I need to do for my business that I can deduct, but will also allow me to grow and become more profitable in the future. And again, that people don't like to pay for professional services. I don't know what the hang up there is, but if those things are adding value to the business, if they're helping you grow, if they're augmenting your skill set, then those investments can be certainly worth it. So those can be good deductions that people are kind of hesitant to make because of the benefit you get out of them.
Yeah.
Other things that I would want people to think about is travel. We can do a lot of travel personally, and it's very expensive. And what I like to do myself, and other food bloggers like to do, is make the travel have a business purpose, and then you're still going to do something enjoyable. So if you're going to a food conference, or you're going to some sort of trade show event, do it in somewhere cool like Hawaii. You're going to go there anyway personally. Go there, make it have a business purpose, and have your business pay for it. There are some rules around that, so and I don't want to get too much into those details, but you've got to make sure that you're doing certain things so that travel becomes a business expense and not just a personal expense that you could get in trouble with.
I mean, for example, like you would only, like if you're staying at a resort in Hawaii because of this conference, only the nights that are relevant to that conference are probably deductible. The rest of the nights are on your own, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes. But if you're going to be there for the conference anyway, and you're paying for the hotel anyway, you may as well be in somewhere that you want to be in that's beautiful and enjoyable. So
you can always transfer to a different hotel that's not as expensive too.
or you just reimburse the business for the personal portion of that vacation. Or
what does that mean? Say that again.
So let's say that you went to the conference and you were there for 3 days, but you decided to stay in Hawaii for a week.
Yeah.
So we're gonna reimburse. So the company's going to pay for that hotel, and then we're going to have the owner reimburse for the personal expense portion of that. So 4 out of the 7 days, the business owner will reimburse the company for that expense.
Oh, that works out really well then too, huh?
Yeah, there's lots of ways you can do it, or you can move hotels, like you said, and just pay for the second stay with your personal funds.
Yeah. Well, I just feel like, so as I talk with various food bloggers, and I've been at this podcast for a couple of years now, so I definitely have talked with a lot of food bloggers over the years, and I've had a conference, and it seems like the business side of food blogging is the part that drives people crazy the most. And they love the creative, they love the photography, they love creating the recipes and all of that stuff. But then it comes down to this business side. And that's why I thought, when I read your bio and I read the things about you, you have a certain kind of sense of self-discipline when it comes to the business side. And do you have a philosophy that maybe others could adopt that would help them with that?
Well, this is going to sound funny, but I tell people to do what they do best. If you don't like doing the business side, then contract with somebody to do it for you. That being said, I don't want owners to completely unplug from the business, because then there's a disconnect there to where they're not really understanding. They don't see things the way that they are, and the accounting that we do creates a picture. Everybody thinks that accounting is like math. Accounting is not like math. It's more like art. It's creative. If I paint a picture of a company, it will look maybe different than another accountant painting a picture of that company. So it is pretty creative, but it allows you to see the health of your company, the direction that you're going, potential trends that are happening within your business. And if you disconnect from that completely, then you lose touch with what's really happening. You may be working very hard. You may be creating a great blog with fantastic food and pictures and all of that other stuff. But if it's not getting the results you need, and you're not aware that that's happening, you'll find yourself a year and a half down the road and not realize that you're not heading where you thought you would be.
Right.
So it's good to manage your business and mind the store. But if you don't like doing that day-to-day work, then hire an accountant to do it. It's, I love it. I don't know what else I'd be doing other than being an assassin is doing accounting. So
I saw that in your bio. What does that mean, Darren?
I don't know. I don't know how to do anything besides accounting, and there's lots of dirtbags out there that need killing. So I think Ben Affleck kind of stole my idea. I never saw that movie, but he's got that accountant movie, and that was like my life story right there.
I have not seen that movie either. Did it get? I don't think it got very good reviews, did it?
I don't know. It was rated R, so it just kind of drops off my radar. So
yeah, you've got to negotiate movies with 4 kids, so
that's right. I got to have some filters.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Oh, that's right. I actually did. I think I heard people talking about it, that he's an accountant that turns into an assassin as well. Interesting.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and I want royalties from him because that's my idea.
That's really good. Okay, good. I love that. I love that, just a reminder to folks, even if you hate the business side of food blogging, you love the creative side more, and you're going to hire an accountant to help you. I think what I'm hearing you say, Darren, is that you really need to know, and you got to follow good business practices. You got to set up, ways that your accountant doesn't take advantage of you. You got to be on top of things still. And I feel like you also have to kind of have some system set up so that you're keeping track of your receipts and keeping track of your miles. Otherwise, your accountant's going to be scratching his or her head all the time.
Yeah, that's right. And then they won't enjoy working with you, and you
Yes.
you won't like the service that you get from them. So you do
Yes.
have to be engaged. You do have to,
Respect
again,
it.
back to the dentist discussion. You don't want
Yes.
to go to the dentist, but to keep your teeth healthy, it's something that you need to do. So find somebody that you like working with, that you trust, but also monitor that and know what's going on with your business so you don't get taken advantage of, and you can make better business decisions.
Yeah.
Marley, you'd mentioned something about receipts, and we didn't really get into that, but
Okay.
keeping track of receipts is very important if you're to get a review from the IRS. You have to substantiate the business deductions that you have. So if you're going out on a business meal, you need to keep track of those receipts, and people like to throw them in a shoebox or something like that. But again, with technology, they have apps for your phone where you can just take a picture of that receipt. It captures it. You can make notes about it, and then it stores it away. So if you ever do get audited, you've got an app filled with those receipts that support that deduction.
I actually write on the receipt itself. Like I'll say business lunch with so and so. I
Yes,
write their names on it.
that's right. So if to substantiate that as a business deduction, you've got to know where you went, what the business purpose was, who you were there, how much you spent, and the detail of what was purchased. So all that's on the receipt. And when you capture a picture of that, you can write on the receipt and get that on the picture, or the apps will have a way to write a memo about that picture you're taking. So it's really, really helpful. You just take a picture and forget about it. You move on.
You can do that the same thing with your groceries and everything like that.
Right, exactly. If you're
Oh,
buying stuff from Amazon, they keep pretty good track of your receipts.
yeah.
The credit card statements that you get, they do count as substantiation, but the IRS really is looking for an invoice or receipt or something like that is what helps make that deduction legitimate.
So just get in the practice of, like you say, I really love your tip about having a separate account. It doesn't have to be a business banking account either, right? It could just be a separate account.
Right, exactly. Sometimes it's hard to set up a business banking account or business credit cards. So if you just get it in your personal name and then just dedicate it to the business only, then that works just fine.
Excellent. I think these are such great tips. I'm really thrilled that you took some time to be on the show with me today, Darren. I always love to ask people some fun questions. Are you game?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so
You got to know I'm a little crazy, though.
I I know I'm a little worried about this part, but let's see how it
Yeah.
goes. Okay.
All right.
What's one food item you can't live without?
Oh boy. This is not even. You guys are gonna hate me, but I'm hooked on these stupid Monster drinks. Does that count?
I think it counts. Tell me more about them. What are they?
So they're the energy drinks, and they probably are gonna make my heart explode someday. But man,
I
they're
think
so good.
so.
Yeah.
Are they loaded with caffeine?
Yeah, well, they don't call it caffeine. It's all these other weird chemicals. But
Oh,
yeah, I love that. But seriously, more of a regular food item that I can't live without is pizza. I love pizza.
yes, really. Any particular kind?
No, just a good supreme with all the meat and veggies and everything.
Good. I mean, pizza is such a great staple. It's like almost every Friday night at our house.
That's right. It's got everything on that you need.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. Okay. What's the favorite app on your phone? And you cannot say that receipt app. It has to be something different than that.
You know, it's funny. Because of my kids, I specifically don't put any games on my phone because then they're
Good.
like, "Hey, let me use your phone," and then they screw things up. So I have nothing fun on my phone. But probably the thing that I use it most for is for YouTube. I love my YouTube app.
Ah, I don't even have a YouTube app. Do you just use it to check out what's like cat videos or what?
Cat videos, yeah, exactly. No, I like to watch people that do travel videos and product reviews,
Ah,
things like that.
cool. I love that. Okay, so I imagine you're a pretty busy guy with four kids and everything, but if you have any time for TV at all, and if so, what's your favorite show?
Oh yeah, so not TV. I guess the new TV is Netflix. So I watch
Yes.
Netflix all the time. There are several series I've watched that I really enjoy, but the one I'm on right now is called Burn Notice.
I don't think I know that one. What's it about?
So it's a spy. He was a spy for the U.S. government, and they blacklisted him, and so he basically got fired, and now he's trying to figure out who blacklisted him and how to get his job back, and he's doing all these crazy things in the meantime. So it's really fun, and it's very clean.
I have a
Uh,
feeling you're going to be one of these people. You're going to be the accountant for all these years, and then you're going to start writing like spy thrillers or something.
yeah, that's right. No, actually, also get into the minimalist stuff. So I want to go live on a boat outside of Florida and travel between there and the Bahamas on my boat that I'm going to live on.
Ah, that sounds really exciting. Your kids could come visit you there then, huh?
No, I don't know. They're not allowed.
I love it. Hey, Darren, how can people find you online?
Uh, well, I've got just my website is 47CPA, and the 4 is the number, and 7 is spelled out. So 47CPA.com.
Love it. Darren, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me. I had a really good time.
My pleasure, Marley. You're a good kid. Thanks for your time.
Thanks to Darren Judd for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. Be sure to sign up today for the Chopped Academy newsletter so you'll be the first to know about our upcoming courses and webinars. Go to chopped.academy and then scroll down to the bottom of the page for the sign up form. Thanks to everyone for your support of the Chopped Podcast. Your reviews on iTunes and Stitcher make such a big impact. I also appreciate the personal outreach as well with your feedback about the show. It's all very helpful and means so much to me. You inspire me, and I hope today's show is helpful and inspirational to you as well. Now go forth and be your best you.